Queen's Voice. Today we're again running into Marty Dolan. Marty, what brings you here?
So we're here today as a protest against the conditions in the NYCHA houses. It's a 5-borough protest organized by NY Indivisible, and they're having a protest here in Queens. They're having one in Staten Island. They're having one in Brooklyn. They're having one in the Bronx and Manhattan, all at the same time, because you've got 500,000 city residents who live in the projects, and the conditions are not great to say the least. So that's what we're here. We're here to just get the message amplified, try to get it out to people, so that when you've got 8 million people and you have 500,000 of them living in the projects, these are your neighbors, and we should care more, and we should get the city involved in trying to make things better.
So what are some of the things that you are aware of or that you found that people are complaining about, some of the horrendous things?
Well, when you go around, we spend a lot of time going around the projects in the Bronx and in Queens, and what happens is you get work started, you get the scaffolding. So when you're in the projects, you have the scaffolding. There's always scaffolding. There's something gets started, but things never get finished. So there's a lack of connection between the request for work and actually it can get started or it can not get started. But when it gets started, it never gets finished. And so there's a good list of things here, but the most important thing, I think, is that New York's kind of on a treadmill with the projects. So there's a lawsuit already from a Fordham law professor about the treatment of the NYCHA residents during COVID. So during COVID, there were supposed to be rent moratoriums. There was this thing where you couldn't go to work. So if you can't go to work, how can you pay the rent? And so there was supposed to be this forgiveness program, and the lawsuit alleges that NYCHA failed to, tell its residents of all the different programs that were available. Our perspective is a little different, which is we want to see the projects. Everybody sees them; they're all over New York. They've been here for 70 years. Some of the people have lived here for 70 years. It's very common that you run into people who've lived here for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We'd like to see a path for what we call real equity at last. And by real equity at last, we call it keeping it real with the projects. We want to see where the ownership of these apartments can be migrated to the people who live here. So a form of privatization. So instead of the city owning these apartments in 2050, they would be owned by the residents. Now it's going to take time because each building is different. Here you are in Queensbridge. It's a pretty good location. It's right by the river. It'd be a nice place. Some of the other projects up in Throggs Neck or in Millbrook, each one would be different. But what we're calling for is that we want to see a path forward for the residents to become owners of their apartments, and then they wouldn't have to rely on the city to do all the repairs. They would have ownership, and then you would break the cycle of the city always having to take care of the buildings.
Now, a lot of proponents are for, and some proponents are against such a. There's pros and cons. Some believe that privatization might raise prices so unbearable that it might not be affordable, which is a legitimate question. How would you address that?
I think what you look at with some of these buildings is they're going to have to be rebuilt down the road. They're not that efficiently built. They were built in the old days. They were built in the 1950s. Some of them were built in the 1930s or 1940s, and you have a housing shortage in New York, and you have a nice big campus here. So what we would anticipate happening is that some of the buildings would be rebuilt. You can repair some of them, but some of them you're better off just to rebuild them. You give equity for the people who've been there. You now have got more housing to offer people. And then you kind of keep the cost of living about the same for the people who've been here.
So will the number of units increase around here in the ideal situation, or will it remain the same in case of a rebuild?
Well, you're talking about an idea. You're not talking about a concrete proposal. But yes, the idea would be New York needs more housing. Here you have plenty of room for more housing, but you really have to rebuild some of the buildings, some of the really older buildings, and then you could put more affordable housing in. But it would be nicer. You could have more amenities. You could really turn it into something that can go for another 100 years. But you don't want to go for another 100 years where you have the city as the landlord and the tenants are the residents. What you'd want to have is the city should be a facilitator so that the long-term residents can become owners. They can get real equity at last in their apartments, and then migrate the city out of being a landlord.
So in the long term, it is definitely a positive thing. Uh, what are some of the positives that people can expect when this goes into effect, when this is accepted and
Well,
done?
it's a long road. I mean, NYCHA is 500,000 residents. You have many different campuses, so each campus is different. It would take a long time to do this, but what you see when you go around and talk to people is people want a path to owning their own home. They want a place where they can have their kids grow up. They want a place where they can put down roots, and they want a path to home ownership. And I think when you get home ownership, you get more responsibility. It's up to you, the community, to keep the buildings together. You can make a profit on your investment. You can rent out your apartment if you want to go away. And it's what everybody wants with home ownership. It's part of the American dream. And that the city shouldn't be in the housing business for 100 years. Now it's already 50, 60, 70 years. They need a path, an exit route, so that because the problem with the city is now the city's in the housing business, and they're picking up the trash, and they're taking care of the pensions, and they're taking care. The city has too much to do, and what happens when you have too much to do is you don't do any of it well. So I think you should have a path for New York to get out of the housing business. It'd be really good for the people in the residents here to have a path to home ownership, and then the city can do fewer things and try to do them better.
I think this also goes into a previous interview we had, previous discussion, where you said the city shouldn't be involved in the retirement business and leave it to somebody else to do that.
Yeah, the city really misled voters back, decades ago when they agreed these pension plans, because basically now you have a system of taxation without representation, which is, you're paying taxes. Everybody in New York is paying taxes today for promises that were made 30 or 40 years ago, and that's not right. We had a war with the British against taxation without representation. So you just have to find a way. New York's so complicated. We have to find a way to make things simpler, so it's easy for the city to do the things that they should do. It's fine that they have a pension plan, and it's fine that they're investing for retirements, but that's not really the function of a city. The function of a city is to provide infrastructure, safety, take care of the streets, take care of the people, and then let the people get on with their lives.
All right, fantastic. And in closing, what would you like to just generally comment on, tell the people out there in the world what they should be doing based on this situation?
Get registered to vote. The number one thing. We have a big election coming up in November. It's very important that everybody get out and vote for that. And then we have the municipal elections next year. We have city council, borough president, we have mayor, we have a bunch of elections next year. So if you want things to change, if you want things to be better, you have to get registered, you have to get involved, you have to come out for events like this, and you definitely have to vote.
And are you going to be more publicly active? Are we going to see you more bumping into across New York City, or will you be taking a little hiatus?
Well, our primary was just a few weeks ago, so we're thinking things over, but I'm definitely going to be involved somewhere.
All right, fantastic. Marty Dolan, everybody.
My pleasure.
Marty, thank you.
Thanks.